The opinions expressed on the following sponsored program are strictly those of its host, guests, and callers and are not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors. Welcome to the STARS program, Seniors Taking Active Roles in Society, with your host, Anita Finley. Your comments and questions are welcome during today's broadcast. Call us toll-free at 888-721-0074. That's 888-721-0074. And now, here's your host, Anita Finley.
Good morning, everyone. Well, it's been seems like it was the weekend yesterday, but it wasn't. Today's starting the weekend, and it is, as you know, it's Saturday, July 5th. And we're happy to bring you another very, very interesting radio show. We have Darwin Porter, who is our columnist and author, and he is calling in from Staten Island. We're going to talk with him in a minute. Alice Taylor is going to be telling us what's happening at Broward Health. She's the CEO on Broward Health Imperial Point. Then we're going to have Dr. Ridgway, our veterinarian, tell us some interesting things. And I have an author calling in from Connecticut. It's Russell Stewart. The name of his book is An Idiotic Savant. And he's quite a guy. Very, very, very interesting man. And we'll learn more about what that means. And then Dr. Andy Mencia, of course, at 7 o'clock. And we're going to end with Brad Schoengood, who is our the entrepreneur who has invented a very special thing to make your face really look beautiful. It's called the Time Machine. And don't forget, at 9 o'clock this morning, please turn to Beacon. You'll see our TV show that was the Symposium for Cure. And you'll see that on Beacon, which is either Channel 19 or, 67. So now let's get back to Darwin. Good morning, Darwin.
Top of the morning to you, Anita.
Good morning.
Happy
the same to you.
Fourth weekend.
Right. So is it exciting in New York right now?
It's very, very cold in New York right now.
Really?
The coldest 4th of July I have ever seen. It must be the effects of Hurricane Arthur.
Oh, well, because I just met someone on the elevator. They said they just came from New York and it was so hot.
Well, I don't know if they were here yesterday. It was fine. It was lovely. But it's about 50 degrees this morning when I walked out. I had to rush back in and get my autumn clothing.
For heaven's sakes. Well, see, New York is really feeling strange weather, isn't it,
yes.
Between what we were...
Well, yes, you're right, because in a few days it's supposed to be in the 90s. So we're crazy up here, but I want to get to several things I want to talk about. Yes, there's so many things going on right now in New York and in my own life. I'm very confused.
Well, before you start, I want to congratulate you. I see where your Marilyn book got into the Smithsonian.
Yes, and I will talk about that because several things are going on. But first, I have to bring you a bulletin from Beijing.
Okay.
I don't normally do that, but on the same day, the Board of Censors have censored Hillary Clinton's new book and will not allow it to be distributed in China. But on the same day, they gave the okay to my book, Damn You, Scarlett O'Hara, the story of Vivian Leigh and her husband, Lord Laurence Olivier. So I got a pass, and poor Hillary did not. Of course, I don't think I had anything to say negative about China in the book on Vivian Leigh and Laurence Olivier.
So that's what's happened. Wow. So
I thought that was so amusing. Well, I don't think Hillary is amused, but I was even amazed that they agreed to publish my book. I didn't know that the Chinese people knew who Olivier and Vivian Leigh. I've met many Americans who have never seen a film with either of them, even in America, particularly with the younger generation. Even people who've never seen Gone with the Wind.
Well, Darwin, this is interesting. So I'm just getting back to Hillary's book. What did she do? A lot of damage to China, or just the truth?
No, well, some things that would serve. Well, she Secretary of State
sure.
is not going to be writing a book praising China, But now, back to Maryland.
Okay.
I am certainly stepping into a very, very controversial subject, and I'm surprised that the History Channel and the Smithsonian are touching upon it, because I'm sure you read about the keg of worms they opened when they attempted to show a series on Jack and Jackie Kennedy, which had starred Katie Holmes, the young actress who had been married to Tom Cruise.
Yes.
And Craig Lanier, who played JFK. And I think Carolyn Kennedy stepped in, and Maria Shriver, who still has all these media connections. At anything, it was eventually suppressed, and the History Channel dropped it. But it received publicity all over America. And then another channel, a smaller one, picked it up, and I found it fascinating, but not that controversial. Well, talk about controversy. The death of Marilyn Monroe. In my book, Marilyn at Rainbow's End, I called it The Murder That Never Dies. So in 2014, the History Channel and Smithsonian is moving ahead, and I was interviewed extensively. Now, why me? Well, it is now 2014, and Marilyn died in August of 1962, and it was like Agatha Christie's One Little Indian, Two Little Indians. There's virtually no one left.
Oh, Darwin.
who knew or interviewed or knew from a personal way. I mean, they've all died out except one person, Pat Newcomb, who was Marilyn's PR agent, and she isn't talking. I don't even know where she is today. But, Peter Lawford, all those people are now dead. And I got involved with Marilyn in a very early stage. And I'll try to be real quick and tell you about it. It was in 1950 on Miami Beach, and I was 13 years old. And Marilyn was staying at the Helen Mar Hotel, and her beau was staying at the Aroni Plaza Hotel on Miami Beach, and he had put Marilyn at the Helen Mar. Now, I don't want to suggest that Reagan was committing adultery, but because he was between wives. Jane Wyman had divorced him in 1948, and he had yet to marry Nancy Davis, the MGM starlet. So, during that 4-year period between marriages, Reagan was really a man about town, and one of the people he had taken up with was Marilyn Monroe, who was just getting known. She was still fairly unknown. And my mother had designed a bathing suit. My mother liked to design swimwear for playgirls. And she had designed a beautiful bathing suit for Linda Darnell, which she wore in Slattery's Hurricane, a film made in Miami with Richard Widmark, and Marilyn was getting ready to do a film with Richard Widmark called Don't Bother to Knock, where she played a psychotic babysitter. And she liked that bathing suit and contacted my mother through Sophie Tucker, who was Reagan's favorite entertainer. They'd come to visit Miss Sophie, when my mother was working there. And mother was then designing this beautiful bathing suit for Marilyn. And I went by the Helen Mar Hotel with my mother, and when Marilyn was going to try it on for the final fitting, and mother told me to go out of the room. And Marilyn said, "Oh, no, let the boy stay. He has to learn sometime."
Oh, that's good. How old were you?
13.
That's a good one.
But this has nothing to do with the murder of Marilyn Monroe, although I did get involved with her in the last years of her life. The man who hired me to work in New York in television was the partner of Milton Green, who was the famous photographer that Marilyn lived with him. And he became her almost Svengali. And also my boss, Stanley Mills Haggart, was one of the best friends of Arthur Miller. So I got to see Marilyn several times during the last months of her life. And so the day she was killed, I began collecting data on Marilyn. I thought, I didn't believe anything anybody was saying. And like I told the Smithsonian, I took the position of sitting on a jury for 50 years, reading and weighing all the evidence. And most juries aren't given 50 years to come to a verdict. And I did. And then I got to interview all of the major participants over the years. Some I even had to track down to Arkansas where they were dying of cancer. And then I came to my own conclusions, and I'm glad that they respect my conclusions. And my conclusions was that Sam Giancana, the mob boss of Chicago, ordered the death of Marilyn, who was threatening not only to bring down the Kennedys, but to expose him. And he spent a notorious weekend with her at the Cal Neva Lodge, called The Lost Weekend of Marilyn's Life. And so I document in the book the stages that he arranged her murder. Now, the most recent poll of Americans, they poll everything these days, is that 78% of Americans believe that Marilyn Monroe was murdered and was not a suicide. I thought, you can't get 78% of Americans to agree on anything.
Yeah, that's true, but I want to talk about that. So, you always believed, of course, that she was murdered, but how did people get away with it? I don't want to tell, people should buy your book. So I was really amazed when I read your book about that. I guess I didn't realize she was murdered before I read your book.
Well, there was a great cover-up. Now, the way that I'm stepping into this controversy, normally I let other writers and their books attack me, particularly, writers are a very jealous group of people. If I cover the same subject that some other biographers covered and I have come up with new evidence, they usually denounce me and call me a moron. But maybe they are the ones not so bright. For example, there's a book out now, and I don't even want to name it, that makes the preposterous assertion that Bobby Kennedy, on orders of the president, personally involved himself in the murder of Marilyn Monroe, which occurred when there were 6 or 7 people in the house, and he was aided by 2 Los Angeles policemen. I view that as totally absurd. And what's the source on that? The source is confidential, this writer says. Well, now wait a minute. As a reporter on the Miami Herald, I was told you could say on certain circumstances the source is confidential. You should do that only as a last resort. But you can't say that the Attorney General of the United States, acting on orders of the President of the United States, participated in the murder of Marilyn Monroe and quote a confidential source. I think that defies all, that would never stand up anywhere. And certainly Bobby Kennedy was involved in the life of Marilyn Monroe, and I went into that in great detail. And I didn't mean to take on these writers, but I just found that absurd, because all the clues, and there were many people who later confessed about Sam Giancana, including his brother Chuck and his nephew, who was also called Sam Giancana. And then I have all these people over the years who traced it to the mafia, and I think that's a much better case than Bobby Kennedy personally murdered Marilyn Monroe, which it's just too absurd to take seriously. Yet many people have maintained that over the years.
May I just interrupt you a moment? So at this point, was she really on drugs? Was she, she wouldn't have allowed some of the things to happen to her if she were sharp as a tack.
She was, but now the usual story is that Marilyn Monroe had been fired from Fox. She was despondent. She was on medication, although nothing was found in her system. You know, she was supposed to take all these pills. Well, they didn't show up in her body. And I've even explained how she was killed, but I mean, it's too long to go into right over the air right now. But the one thing that I have refuted is, far from being a has-been, she was on the dawn of a great career. I talked to executives at Fox. They admitted they fired her, but they said they were bringing her back. She was offered $750,000. Now we're talking in 1962 per picture, where she'd been getting $100,000. Frank Sinatra wanted to make a movie with her. In fact, they were supposed to meet that Monday, and she died on a Saturday night, to remake A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. And Gene Kelly wanted her to play a woman who has 7 husbands, and what a way to go. Italy was offering her a 4-picture contract. Las Vegas would give her $100,000 a week if she would appear there. That would be worth about $1 million a week today, in today's terms. In other words, for the first time in her life, she was able to start making money. Joe DiMaggio has proposed marriage. I talked to Jose Bolaños, who was her boyfriend, from a Mexican screenwriter, and he had proposed to Marilyn. I found out something. I got one time to meet Joe DiMaggio Jr., very nice young man, and he was also in love with Marilyn and wanted to marry her, and said he would take better care of her than his father. He was pretty young. Marilyn, I'm sure, would not have married him, although, you know, she was very loving toward the boy, and he just had one of these crushes that young men get. But anyway, the History Channel is going to wade into this. Now, whether this movie will be shown in America is still up. You can't say that it will be. It's already will be shown in Britain, France, Australia. But, you know, forces could still come to bear. I mean, I'm amazed that the powers took the Kennedy series off the air, and I really feel the Marilyn Monroe series will be far more controversial than basically all that was said in the Kennedy series. Is he was a womanizer, but don't you think most Americans are aware of that by now?
I want to ask you, though, so you're saying, we're talking about Marilyn, but of course I'm so obsessed with your book on Jackie. Of course, I read the Marilyn book, and I'm so glad that at least it is becoming very famous for you. But have you heard from Carolyn Kennedy about this? Remember, we talked about it, that she would be very upset?
No. I know that the book was sent to her, and I think of all of her reading material in Tokyo, that would be one that she would at least look at. But of course, I've not particularly dealt with Carolyn Kennedy in the book, because she's not really peripheral to the story of Jack and Jackie. But the Jackie book has really taken off, and once again, when I did Marilyn or Elizabeth Taylor or Jackie, people say, "Oh no, these women have been done to death. These books won't sell." Well, they've outsold any books I've ever written.
I told you so. I told you when I was there with you.
You were right.
This was the book.
You were right. In fact, another printing has just gone out into the stores, but it's already been pre-ordered. One thing is, you've got to have something new to say. I think if you're just rehashing stuff that everybody knows, and I've been very fortunate. You know, I've spent a great deal of my life digging material. Now, this was never my full-time occupation. You know, for 50 years. I traveled the world for the Frommer Guides. I wrote, 320 books, revised edition often. And that gave me an opportunity to be, like, for example, if Jackie was were going to be in India or Pakistan or Capri or Ravello or certainly Rome, Paris, and London, I always time my research trips to be where Jackie was. Like, I followed her to Seville because I also do a book on Seville, or did. And when she had the big feud with Grace Kelly, who also went for the April Fair. So I was always on Jackie's trail because I one day wanted to write a book about her. And Jackie was very good at suppressing the story of her life. But, when you're that famous, you can't really suppress what you're doing, particularly if you were being, it's like if Bill Clinton wants to have an intern in the Oval Office.
Right.
It comes out. I mean, if you're a famous person, the most famous person in the world, some people talk. In fact, a lot of my material on Jackie came after she died in 1994. When people are going out of life, and I found this true with movie stars, during the peak period of when these things are happening, movie stars are very reluctant to name people or to talk because it involves living people. If you get them into trouble. But I found near the end of their life, when people are dead and gone, their telephone is no longer ringing. They're very willing to open and sit down and say, "Now listen, don't believe any of that crap you've heard. Here's what really happened." It's almost like they want to set the record straight.
Yeah. Let me tell everyone, my guest is Darwin Porter. And Darwin, of course, writes a column in our magazine. We're so fortunate to have that every month. This month coming up, well, it's the old guys that are coming back on the scene, but the magazine will be out this coming week. But the one that he just finished was Hollywood Remembered, Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis, A Life Beyond Her Wildest Dreams. And Darwin is certainly a very, very informed, and he's probably the best celebrity writer in the world, and we're so happy that we have this opportunity to talk with him. Okay,
well, my enemies certainly would not say that.
Oh, yeah, you don't have any enemies. They're just jealous people.
Do I ever? Usually, the people in the press, usually, who are more informed, it's the people that you that you destroy an image they might have had of someone. For example, many people, I was amazed, have an image of Jackie Kennedy that was not anything to do with her. Remember, there were two Jackie Kennedys. The Jackie Kennedy who married John F. Kennedy in the 1950s was not the Jackie Kennedy of the 70s, she was never a feminist, but she was a very strong-willed and independent woman. She was no longer the shy, demure little girl with the Marilyn Monroe voice, and because she evolved over the years into something quite different. And I admire and respect her, although some people are saying I've really revealed too much about her. But I view her as a figure now in history, and we write about Josephine and Catherine the Great and Eleanor of Aquitaine, so why not Jackie Kennedy Onassis? Certainly one of the most fascinating women, I think, who ever lived.
Well, you were actually in the book. I hope people will buy the book because once you do, and it's very big, it's 700 pages plus, it is captivating, and you're never mean to her. I mean, you're never mean in your books, but some books are a little bit more devilish, but this wasn't. This just stated things that happened, and I never was upset with her, actually. I just knew that she was what you said. She did evolve, and she had her own life, and she had a right to have her own life for what she did, and actually being in the book editing world after that, and then all the things she did, I really still admire her.
And she had many, many love affairs. She liked men very much, and that's not a criminal offense, is it?
No.
One thing I want to say, people talk about how big my books are, but they're big, but how many books contain 400 pictures?
Right. That's true. I think that's what makes it drives you to keep going to the next page, and you see pictures that no one's ever seen before, and it is so amazing when I always wonder where I know you store all this stuff in huge vaults everywhere, but it is great that, of course, that Danforth Prince, who is your partner and co-author of the book, is able to take the right picture, put it with the right page. I mean, it's an undertaking beyond.
His contribution is handling the photographs, which are very difficult to obtain in some cases. But the thing about it is, I've noticed, particularly baby boomers, they'll forget maybe a name, but when they see the picture, they told me, "Oh yes, I've seen that person in many movies."
Right.
It's like you suddenly see who you were talking about, and that's why I use so many pictures. I know it makes the book big, but everybody wants those pictures, so 400 pictures per book. Most biographies have 10 pictures in the middle.
Well, it certainly makes the book a bargain. I mean, I don't know how you can possibly print that book and sell it as inexpensively as you do. The book is $26.95, and if you divide that with 700 pages, I mean, you ought to be charging more.
It really doesn't. Amazon they're having various price wars, and they're discounting the book so much that it's what in marketing is called a loss leader, meaning they lure you in, they hope you'll buy 2 or 3 other books. They chose Jackie as the loss leader, so I think they're practically giving it away on Amazon.
There she goes again. Now she's a loss leader, right?
Yes. Well, I think we better go off the air and get on with that fabulous show.
Not yet. I think we have another minute or two. I don't know. What do we have?
All right.
Because we have 2 minutes. We have 2 minutes.
What's
your next book? What are you working on for your next book?
Well, I'm working on the story of a little B-picture starlet at MGM who's trying to break into the movies, even posing for cheesecake, and a B-picture actor who, believe it or not, posed for beefcake and trying to break into the movies, and they ended up as the most powerful couple ruling the world. And, of course, that could only be Ronald and Nancy Reagan.
Oh, wow, that's another one.
They've suppressed most of their story, but I'm telling the story. And then, of course, it's called Love Triangle, and the triangle would be Jane Wyman, who was 8 years married to Ronald Reagan, and who was a great Oscar-winning actress herself. But nearly everything about the Reagans, they don't concentrate on them as movie stars, and Reagan had many, many involvements, and I've been on his case for years, and I find it. There are plenty of books on Reagan as president. I end in 1964.
And we're going to end now. Right, and we're going to end now because we've done it. But, Darwin, this was wonderful. I was so glad that you brought up the 2 books, and we certainly hope that you have a warmer July.
All right, and remember now, this is the second book I will be doing on a First Lady.
I know that. It's going to be great, but just keep selling Jackie.
Yes, I will.
Our lost leader. That's very funny. Leader. Lost leader. I love this. Okay, that was good.
A great show.
Okay, thank you, Darwin. All right.
Good morning.
Good morning. Bye.